Hi, everyone. Welcome to our show, Brilliant Business Insights. This show solves your greatest business leadership and professional development challenges. We realize there isn't one solution to every problem, so we bring you proven strategies, best practices, and expert insights to get you, your business, and your employees where you want to go by removing the BS.
Yes.
It's Lori Kuhn and Jen Fredericks with Thrive, a human development company. To learn more, please check us out at our website at thrivehdc.com. We also have John Taylor behind the camera, our video and production guru, who is with Milwaukee Video and can be contacted at milwaukeevideo.com. That's mkevideo.com. Then joining us later is special guest Pat Dwyer, speaker, comedian, and an outright delight.
So I'm excited about today's topic.
You are?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Well, because it's fun.
It is fun. We like to have fun.
So, and what's interesting about this is, I always think of it from the perspective of people don't want to do things that aren't fun. Like, you never hear people at work going, this project sucks, put me on it. I
mean, every once in a while, maybe if there was someone I wanted to work with or,
Oh, true. Yeah. Like a fun person's on it. So you're like, oh, okay, I'll do that. Yeah. But generally you're not like, put me on the worst thing to do. Or
right. No. Yeah. That sucks.
And I actually have this sticker that's on my refrigerator that says, I don't have time for anything that's not fun.
That is your motto.
And, right. And it's like, everything's an experience in life. And why do I want to experience something that sucks? So that's what we're talking about today. So today we're talking about business is serious. And I know this because I just spent a week with a bunch of business people, and there are some serious people out there. Anyway. But so the topic is business is serious, break on through to the other side.
Doors. That's
yes.
The doors. Okay.
Dun, dun, dun. And that's what I was thinking. Like the intro for our song today should have been a door song. Dun, 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 dun.
But that takes very much pre-planning.
Oh, you're right. We don't pre-plan.
So what are we discussing specifically in this episode?
So in this episode, we're discussing the problem with being too serious in business, the benefits to humor at work, and how to effectively infuse humor. In other words, how to break on through to the other side. Because,
so life doesn't suck.
Right, right, absolutely. And there are bad ways of infusing humor. I've done it. I've been there. I've tried to infuse humor, and I got the blank stare like, did she really just say that? And yeah.
Mostly that's with my teenager.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yep. But I can't really think of a problem with being too serious at work. I mean, because business is serious business. However, I also can think of how having a little more fun at work is beneficial, because I have worked at a couple of companies that really value their employees, and including Thrive, definitely, but also in my agency and corporate days. And even though they were really awesome companies and we did really awesome, fun things, a lot of it was taken so seriously. It was like we were neurosurgeons or something.
Yeah.
And I would always try to keep that in mind, because the things that we were doing were amazing. And when we were too serious, it wasn't fun at all.
Yeah.
And then you just had bad attitudes walking toward you and away from you, and no one having fun in meetings. And then at the end of the day, I had no energy. I would go home and just want to sit around and watch TV, which is also fun. I like that. But then what I've learned since working at Thrive and doing this work is that we actually were all limiting our capability, because we were working from our sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight, flight, or freeze. And when we're in that, it really increases our stress, our burnout, our overwhelm, anxiety, depression, fatigue, and it decreases all the things you want to have at work, like motivation, creativity, problem solving, engagement, and productivity.
Yeah. It's interesting because I had a client, and they had to be creative. So they were engineers and they had to design different products. And so, a client would want something specific, so they'd have to go into, this creative, innovative space. And I was asking him about that. You know, we need to be more creative. We need to be more innovative. I mean, this was a drill. And I'm like,
and we know how much drills work.
Right.
Creative. Like, do it now.
Right. So it's like, drop everything you're doing. I know you're all overwhelmed. I know you're putting in 80 hours a week, but let's get in this room, shut the door, and be creative. Okay. Like, that's going to go over really well. And it was the same with my background's public accounting. And it was what I really liked. You think of, accountants, they're all stuffy and stodgy and don't know how to have fun. But during the thick of busy season, so, we're all putting in 80 plus hours a week, and it'd be like 6 o'clock at night. And the partner, and I'm not saying they still do this, and I probably shouldn't tell you that we used to do this, but there was a bar downstairs. It'd be like, okay, let's go have a cocktail. And we'd all go downstairs and drink, and then I'd come back up and do your taxes, and I apologize if anything was wrong on them. But that was a way to kind of loosen everybody up and just get back into a mode of, because he could sense the tension.
Right. Well, that's great. And I mean, counting isn't the only place where that was used as a way to loosen up. Actually, the agency I worked with, we worked hard and we played hard, and 3 o'clock was Miller time. And the traditional pool table, foosball tables, music blaring, that kind of stuff. And so it helps you reset. So from your perspective, what are the benefits of that reset, of that kind of like taking people out of state and bringing in some relaxation, some humor, some breathing?
Yeah. And I really like that you talk about bringing people out of state, because that's what happens. We get so, I always call it zonar. I don't even know if that's a word, but you get so zoned in on something that everything else kind of disappears, and you're just like, your brain almost hurts because you're so focused on it. And sometimes you just have to take yourself out of that context or out of state to expand and start thinking about things differently. And the reason I like humor as being able to do that is because, you were talking about your sympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
Well, the opposite of that is your parasympathetic nervous system. And so that's your calm, relaxed state. And there's a chemical component that's associated with that. And
the chemical cocktail.
The chemical cocktail. And we talk about, this isn't the one where you go downstairs to the bar.
No, it's a different cocktail.
But so when you're in that state, when you're having fun and, you're bringing that humor and that lightness into things, you're getting out of a state, your brain is releasing a different hormone cocktail. And that's what's going throughout your system. That's what brings us into the innovation, the creative state, because now all our resources aren't going to the fight or flight.
Right.
So now we have more resources available to go into the creative expanded state. And so one of the things that I also like to mention when we're talking about just the humorous place is, if I want someone to retain something, I want them to be in that parasympathetic nervous system.
Why is that?
Well, because I can stand in front of you and talk about things. And if you're in a state of stress, kind of like the example I gave about this company I was in, and okay, come in here and be innovative.
Sure.
Well, now I've taken you away from your job. I've taken you away from what you're doing, and you're in the sympathetic nervous system. You're going to sit in there and you're going to do barely enough so you can get out of there to finish up the work or whatever stress you are currently dealing with.
Yes. If
I can get you in the parasympathetic nervous system, now what we're talking about, not only are you innovating more, but what we're talking about is going to be retained. You have a 92% chance of retaining it versus an 8% if you're coming out of the sympathetic nervous system. Wow. So any retention creativity is significantly increased if I get you operating from the parasympathetic nervous system, which is what humor does.
Yes. Is there anything else that humor is a benefit to work?
It brings in better relationships, better attitudes. One of the things I like to talk about too is not only does it open you up to being more authentic and creative, but it increases psychological safety. So, when you're around people and they're just more light, more humorous, more engaging, you feel safer. You feel like you can trust them more. And I don't like to say, humorous people are more trusting, but it breaks down barriers so you can start feeling that connection more. So you can start feeling a little safer with the individual. And people don't look at that when they think about the benefits of humor in the workplace.
Right. I have a great example of that. So there was a person who was fresh out of school and started at a company. It's the first week, really, really, really nervous. And this person's manager started to make a joke about how he actually could be this kid's father. And so he started calling this kid midlife, like midlife crisis. And it really, like, again, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, like that could have gone awry.
Yeah.
But what it did for this new employee was open up a space of psychological safety and trust and being comfortable with this new team. And so I just love that the manager took the opportunity to kind of dive in and get to know this new employee that way. But again, we'll talk a little bit more about what's needed to be able to do that in a effective way.
Yeah. And this is a little out of context, but on this trip I was just on, like I said, I was with a bunch of stodgy business people, but I
hope they're all watching it right now.
I don't mean to refer to you all as stodgy, but some of you were very stodgy. But we were on this catamaran, and then a group of spring breakers came up on another catamaran, and they have grills going and slides coming off it, and they're all early 20s. Songs and all, all sorts of things. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be entertaining.
Yeah.
To watch them. A catamaran full of stodgy guys and a bunch of spring breakers. So I had to watch the dynamic because I'm one of those people. But so the funny part was at one point, this guy walks up, one of the stodgier guys, and goes, I have shoes older than that. And I couldn't. I'm like, good one. And I'm not going to say his name, but I was like, that is a very good one. And I'm like, that's all you have. This is all going on, and that's all you have to say. Anyway, it was funny.
It's awesome. Well, I think also one benefit of humor is that you get energy from it. So even like right now, talking with you, I could be completely nervous. I'm not really, because I really like cameras, but I could be completely nervous and start to go inward and not have enough energy and not come across with the energy that we want to on camera. And so us being able to talk and converse and have fun with these conversations gives us more energy that we then can share with the viewers.
Yeah. And I know people out there, the serious business people are like, what's the ROI? Show me the ROI for humor in the workplace. And we're going to get to that a little bit later with our guest, Pat. But, some of it is, and we'll get more into depth on this, the creativity, the problem solving, the engagement, the productivity, the efficiency, the building a foundation of motivation. All of this is what comes from bringing humor into the workplace.
Cool. Speaking of our guest, I'd like to intro Pat Dwyer, speaker, comedian, and outright delight. Aside from being a professional speaker, comedian, and writer, Pat has worked, toured, performed, and taught with comedic institutions, The Second City, IO Theater, and ComedySportz for over 20 years. He's spearheaded leadership teams at a number of tech startups, including Groupon. I love Groupon. And has been a key culture, creative, and leadership consultant for multiple Fortune 500 companies. Now, all of that stodgy stuff is out of the way. Before we begin, I'd also like to note that Pat is a junior park ranger at over 60 national parks, sites, and monuments around the United States. So while Pat got all of this after he was 25, it's actually traditionally reserved for 5 to 12-year-olds. It's quite an accomplishment. Let's welcome Pat. Hi, Pat.
Hi, good to see
So good to see you.
Hello. Nice to see you.
We're so excited. Yay! So, what have you been up to besides all of the national parks and the junior
national parks?
All of the national
parks. No, not all of them, but a lot.
A lot.
I think I'm up to 64 badges now.
Wow.
I think so. They say badges. The National Park Program has the program for children, but they give you a little plastic ranger badge when you've accomplished the activity booklet, which
an activity booklet.
Yeah, it's a whole booklet.
Is it coloring?
Oh, sometimes. Mostly mazes and research.
Ranger hat or something?
You can.
Really?
It's usually paper, but it's it touches my soul one way or another.
Recyclable.
It is recyclable. You're not wrong. Yeah. So I've been doing that, of course.
Cool.
I also have been speaking for companies large and small all over the country. I speak on innovation and change and how to use humor in some cases to do that, but mostly just about how to make it easier for ourselves to get to innovation, to get to change, and to have a really good time doing it so that's not as scary.
That's awesome.
If you're looking, especially change management, when you think change management, you're like, oh, that's heavy, arduous.
Absolutely.
So when you say, bring fun into change management, sign me up.
Absolutely. Sure, great. I find that we make it bigger in our heads than we need to all the time. We all have these skills. We've been doing it since we were kids on the playground. We say yes to each other. We move forward. As soon as somebody says no, everything stops. Yeah. That's the tenets of improv comedy. We say yes to move the scene forward.
Yes, and.
Yes, and exactly. We move it beyond just a yes. We make it bigger.
I'm hearing you say that we all need to kiss.
Maybe.
Keep it simple.
Right now.
Okay.
I gotta go.
No, I mean, like, I heard you say, keep it simple, sweetheart.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I see, like, the definition, like, if I look up the definition of a human, it would say, making things far more complicated than ever imagined possible. Like, don't you think so?
I do, but I think that's rooted in fear. And that's a very divisive word. But I think that we keep ourselves from doing things based on very animal instincts.
Yes.
And that is that flight or fight response. It is keeping ourselves safe. And the less fear we have, the less conflict we have, the better.
I love that you say that. And one thing that I like to share with clients and family is, yes, there's fear. What would happen if we came from the place of knowing that fear is rooted in love? So is there a way that we can bypass that fear?
Absolutely.
Can we bypass that fear and get right to the love?
I absolutely agree.
Because that would be parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
Cool.
Among other just
wonderful things.
Yeah,
Who doesn't love love? I love love.
For me, the route to that is giggling, laughter, humor, because there is no universal language quite like humor. We all have sadness, we all have anger, we all have all of these root emotions, but there's something about humor that bridges language, that bridges understanding. There is nuance to why people get sad in different cultures around the world. There is nuance to anger and what challenges people to fight. But there's very few things that are a difference between humor around the world. Something happens that's silly, everybody giggles. And I can say silly and everybody knows what that means. It's really, really exciting that that's the core.
Yeah, so silly around the world is sort of the same.
I have found, well, I will say this. I was in the Peace Corps many, many years ago, and I didn't understand the language. I was in Africa, and they were speaking Arabic in the country that I was in, and I couldn't communicate with them because of that language barrier. But the one thing that I did have was silliness and making them giggle. And silliness for an HR perspective is scary. That's a scary word for a lot of people.
Yeah, and here's a little drop plug for you.
Ooh,
yeah, here's a plug for Pat. He has a great video. I think it's on your YouTube channel and on your website that talks about the dirtiest word in business, the dirtiest word in corporate, and that is
silly and goofy and funny. It's actually all those words, but let's say, why dial it down to one when we can dial it to all of them?
It all. Well, and so we're here talking about silly and HR and all of those things. Like, have you found, while there's this universal language of humor and this root understanding of silly and giggles, is there a boundary to using humor?
Yes. I feel that if we can stick to playful, if we can stick to fun, if we can stick to what would be classified as goofy, that's a safe space. As soon as we attack an individual or make it more finite, that's the moment that when you make it directed towards something specific, that's when it gets divisive. That's when it gets dangerous.
So
that's interesting. So what about, like, people who do it to themselves, like they take shots at themselves.
Self-deprecating.
Yeah. So
Well, I think that might be the word.
Yeah.
It is. That was very good. That was the word I was trying to find out.
You're welcome.
I mean, there's certainly a time and space for self-deprecating humor. I hate it. But let me tell you why. I hate it for a couple reasons. Number one, I don't think anybody needs to put themselves down. Yeah. I think that especially when it comes to humor and comedy, it is a matter of the cool kids at the party. So why do we like those kids in high school? Why did we like them? They were not kind,
No.
but they were super cool. And it was a matter that they believed that they were cool. And no one questioned that because they did neither. The moment we use self-deprecating humor, we're giving people an opportunity to fight us. And by that I mean saying, oh, you don't think you're good enough, so why do I need to think you're good enough? It's a challenge to fight. Like, oh, he's a dummy. Oh, he is a dummy? Prove it. Oh, he's smart. Oh, you're smart? Prove it. So it's these kinds of things that create microaggressions as we're creating humor. So I don't like that. Also, not to mention the fact that since COVID, I don't know if anybody's heard of COVID.
No, wait, what is
it happened. It was a thing. Don't worry about it.
We woke up from that.
Yeah, it's clearly gone.
Yeah.
Anyways, the thing with COVID and what we noticed in humor across the board is prior to COVID, a lot of the humor that we would see on TV, a lot of the humor we'd see on movies was very biting. Not to throw anybody under the bus here, but the show Big Bang Theory is a great example for me. People love that show, loved it. It was a lot of people living in a house that absolutely hated each other. And the humor was rooted in that conflict. It was rooted in that biting humor, that fight.
Yeah.
And now what we're seeing is a real swing towards jovial silliness. The new movies that have come out, the new shows that have come out. Ted Lasso is a great example. There is nothing about that show
so good.
that isn't rooted in love, rooted in support. There's humor there, but it's not biting. It's not to fight. If there is a fighter, that's the outlier of that group.
That brings up one of my favorite quotes from Ted Lasso. So Ted is talking to Jamie. Jamie Pratt, Jamie Pratt. Anyway, they're talking, and he's talking. Ted is talking to Jamie about, do you want to be this or this or this or this? And Jamie says, well, I'm me, coach. Why would I want to be anyone else but me? And Ted is like, I don't think you understand how psychologically healthy that really is.
Really.
And like Jamie Tart is just like, I don't get
Why?
Anyway, side note, sorry, let's move forward. Self-deprecating is biting. It brings to mind, and I'm sure you're tired of probably thinking about this or talking about this, but since the Oscars were just on this past weekend, thinking of last year.
Why? What happened last year?
Well, I don't know.
This isn't a dated episode at all.
No, not at all. We're very dating this. The slap heard around the world with, Will Smith and Chris Rock.
But I mean, that goes into, the individualization of what people feel is humorous and what's not humorous. So what's super funny to one person is offensive to somebody else. Yeah. So where Chris thought that was funny, Will obviously didn't think it was funny. And so, and like you said, this was directed toward an individual, and so you might want to shy away from that.
Yeah. Very divisive.
But it brings to mind what I think, and kind of what I said earlier. I said something in this context that I thought was funny, and, it was crickets. Everybody looked at me like, I wasn't funny. And it wasn't an offensive thing toward anyone. I just thought like, right. I mean, have you ever been in that situation where you say something and you're like, oh, this is going to be funny, and, it's like, okay, let's just keep moving.
I am perpetually surprised I have a wife for that exact reason.
Yeah, and my husband sticks around even when, he'll say something just, I don't know, very obvious about something in the room or whatever.
Oh, look at these mugs. They're white.
You're a mug.
See, that's great. That's great.
See, that's what I told him. And he says, you're a 12-year-old boy. And I said, what's wrong with being a 12-year-old boy?
I call my husband that, a 12-year-old boy.
He and I get along.
Yeah.
Well, so when I saw that incident, the personal development coach in me went immediately to, what is under that?
Yeah. Sure.
So it went to, it's very important. I believe that we all have some trauma-informed training when we're speakers and when we're consultants and when we're coaches, and possibly when we're comedians hosting the Oscars, to understand that there are things that could trigger unresolved trauma. And then when you look at Will Smith's story from his biography, and you see where some of that anger most likely came from. So you don't know.
I don't know anything about Will Smith, and after
that is
I was
I'm done with that.
I'm not gonna let anybody hit anybody. I'm gonna walk away.
But it's so interesting, which kind of brings me. It doesn't kind of. It brings me to the point that it's important to know your audience.
Yeah, very much so.
And how much can you know? Because it's impossible when you're speaking to know the dynamics of everybody in your audience. But so I think, going back to your point, if you just don't make it an offensive targeted toward anyone, you're relatively safe.
Even going back to the thing that you said earlier about the individual in that office space, they called the person, he was a younger person.
Oh, midlife.
Midlife,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Was that?
That was me.
Yeah.
Sorry, my fault.
No worries.
So, talking about the midlife thing, that wasn't a joke about the person they were calling midlife.
It was
That was a joke about the person. Yeah, it was a person who was saying, "Oh, I'm old as the hills.
Yeah.
You're my midlife." And they're like, "I'll call you midlife," and then it's a joke really about the person who said it. It's not about the individual that we're talking about.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So that's I just to talk about that nuance and talk about that difference, because it could be construed as, oh, you're attacking that individual.
Right.
It's like you're not. You're kind of attacking yourself, which is that self-deprecating safe space for humor.
Yeah.
Because you're not going after someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Sort of. Absolutely.
And is that the biggest balance you find important when you bring humor into the workplace, keeping that in mind, and keeping in mind, like, well, whatever might be my personal preference of lightening the mood,
Sure.
might not be.
Which I think is very important. I mean, I like that, and I would like to hear your take on that. And it goes back to taking people out of state. We hit those points, and what is that balance of lightening the mood when you're at work and people are intense, without making them feel like either you're mocking them or you're not empathetic toward them.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think there's definitively two different routes here. So, two routes is wrong. Two different discussion points on this. So there is a matter of trying to be funny, which I think we all know will never work. You will never actively be funny.
Right.
Because that is that challenge to fight. That's saying to somebody, you're going to think I'm funny. And that's all there is to it. And the first thing that we want to do whenever we're told anything as human beings, like, don't cross that bridge.
Yeah, rebel.
Mom won't cross that bridge.
I'm going to rebel.
Don't cross the street. Mom won't cross the street. Get your hand off the hot stove. I will not. You know what I mean? Like, whatever it ends up being, we will actively think, our brain changes that. You tell somebody not to do something, the first thing they want to do is that.
Don't think of the pink elephant in the room.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
So by saying, this is going to be really good, you're going to really like this. Okay. I'm going to create a space where somebody's going to laugh.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. You create a space that allows people to laugh. You don't create a space to make someone laugh.
I love the intentionality in that. And we talk a lot about intention setting and how you show up and the space that you create when you're with people and the energy with which you show up. So
how do you create that space?
We were speaking about microdosing before, off camera as well, and that's if we microdose humor throughout the day, you create a space that brings out more enlivened attitudes, more jovial connections. So a great example, when I worked at Groupon a long time ago, a lot of the staff were improviser comedians. It was part of the brand. But I can remember very specifically, we were in a very, very important meeting. Everyone was very serious, and they were in a conference room. Oh, so serious. And so I had stepped out to get something, and I realized that everyone was kind of not where they would be normally. And so I proceeded to row by the conference room but you could only see from here up. So it was just like I was rowing by, and everybody kind of was on the call and trying to stifle laughter. The mood changed completely, and because of that, we got to a place that we wouldn't have got to otherwise.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take full credit for Groupon's success, quote unquote, but
But it was the
totally that instant.
right.
So there are times when we can be a little drop in the bucket and create that ripple effect in our culture, create that drop that makes change easier, that makes innovation something that is palatable.
I love that, and one of the things that I learned during my coach certification was that was my way of coaching. And so I'm very honoring of where people are in life. And I also start, and I didn't know this is what I was doing, but I'm good at microdosing those moments of lightness and those moments of acceptance and love and humor. Like, Lori knows this. If there's a word that keeps going in a conversation, there is a song in my head.
Yep.
And sometimes if I don't sing it, I'll just be sitting there like,
She goes into convulsions.
yeah. So I love the idea of microdosing, so that you can build that safe space that enables change, which
Sure
is
does.
one certain reason people like to have coaching.
Yeah. But then there's the flip side of that, because I think of, like, when I was in public accounting, one specific example was we were in the heart of busy season, and I'm like Jen. My way of releasing stress is through humor, or doing funny things. And so that's just how I cope with it. And I'm very good at handling high amounts of stress because of that. And so I remember being out, I forgot, the context of it all, but a coworker of mine, his brother happened to be there. And so I was throwing out comedy and just doing light stuff because that's what I needed. And I remember him sitting next to me, and he was getting, like, pissed off at me. He was very irritated. And he started accusing me of being out of touch with reality and being Pollyannish, and I wasn't
People call me
taking.
Pollyanna.
Oh, me too.
It's terrible.
He's like, I can't believe you're not taking this seriously. And I'm like, I just spent 80 hours this week in seriousness. Like, I need that release. And so we were kind of having that conversation. Like, I was not going to cry. He was not going to break on through to the other side. And I certainly wasn't going to his side. Or I would have been a puddle of stressed out mush. I'm like, and so we had this, not really a battle, but he was really trying to bring me down, and there was no way it was going to happen. And so you have those people out there. How do you deal with, and do you deal with that? I mean, what do you do in those situations?
I have found personally the only thing that you can do is keep being you. The only thing you can do is keep doing the thing that you find to be true.
Yeah.
There will always be somebody who wants to squash the good time. There's going to always be somebody who wants to kill the vibe.
Yeah.
Because it's a way of control.
Yeah.
It's a way that they find control and manage to get what they need out of the situation.
Yeah.
And you know that about them. That's fine. If they need that, they're going to bang their head against the wall one way or another. Similarly, your version of control in that instance happened to be needing a break.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was about humor versus non-humor as much as we're all kind of at sea. What can we do together to find a middle ground so that we can both function at the highest level that we can function at? I think with humor or with comedy and with the use of it strategically in an office space or in a work environment, we know it boosts retention. We know that culture piece keeps people in an office, especially nowadays. Holy moly. It is absolutely needed to create a culture that isn't just staunch, isn't something that we're feared to be a part of.
Yeah.
We want to live life, and humor is life for most of us. I've never met a single person other than maybe a very recent Tom Hanks movie that somebody is serious all the time. I don't even know what that movie's called. I just saw a commercial for it. Something
starts with an O. Auto?
Oh,
Yeah,
but it's an old book, an older book from something Ove, I think. Maybe.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Doesn't.
We'll put it in the comments.
Yeah.
Here in
the comments.
It'll be in the comments.
But I like that you bring up, people aren't, and I always think of it from an energetic standpoint. When you have that individual who is in a comedic state, like I was with this individual, I always talk about it in terms of the gap. And so we were a vibrational mismatch. So my vibration was here, his was here, and there's discomfort in that. So I think he was in such an uncomfortable place, because I use this example with bosses. The boss comes in and people are having a good time and they're stressed and they're irritated at you because you're having a good time. And they're not irritated at you because you're having a good time. They don't feel good because of the dissonance, the gap between where you're at and they're at. So they're trying to do something to decrease the size of the gap so they can start feeling better, because they can't get to where you are. So I need you to not feel as good so I can feel better. And so there's that struggle in that type of context where you're way too out of my range, so you need to come down that emotional scale so that I don't feel as bad being way down here on this emotional scale.
Diddly to do with the workers, and it has everything to do with the boss.
Absolutely.
In that instance, or the individual that's having that conflict. You say vibration, I use the term music. I think of everybody plays their own song. We have some in our heads all the time, as we now know. The idea that we're all singing different songs, the boss might be on classical, we're over here on pop music.
You're right.
And you have to find your mashup.
Yeah.
There's a mashup for everything. That's, a good part of my relaxation time on YouTube is just looking up mashups, because it's so fun.
Right.
Yeah, you can take two things and make them work together in ways that you couldn't see. But it takes you stepping back, looking at your Lego pieces spread around the room, and say, cool, how do we make this building? Yeah. Is it going to be one color? No, it's not. But it's definitely going to be tall. And the thicker we can make the walls, the better it's going to stand.
Yeah.
But it takes everybody adding to that.
Speaking of mashups and dissonance and vibrational mismatch, what's like the heaviest work environment you've gone into with fun and humor, and you were like, I don't know. Is it like, has that ever happened? What did you do, and how did humor help transform that?
Sure. I will bring up two instances. One, I worked at one that was not interested in having fun and actively not interested in laughter throughohout the day.
It was ComedySportz, wasn't it?
It was very much, honestly, it might have been. No, it wasn't. What I found is I just kept doing it. I kept dropping drops in the bucket. The microdose. And then slowly over time, more people started to see that it was safe. And I'm not even going to suggest there's some like pioneering aspect of that. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm just saying I think that there's a space in every environment to create a space where that can exist. And for me, I did it a little bit more often. I became the funny guy. And then there's a fine line between the funny guy and the guy that you don't trust. And so you need to follow that line very precisely to earn trust while simultaneously creating an environment that can lend itself to humor and fun. Ultimately, it was a different environment when I left than when I started. Who knows how much I had to do with that? I'm not going to
Well, I'm sure
pretend
that
I'm
you highlighted it.
I mean, yes, that makes sense. I mean, from a perspective of environments that I've gone into and created a different culture, I've heard feedback after I've done presentations or speeches at places that said, oh, you gave us permission to do this. I worked recently for a credit union bureau, and they had all these different credit unions that came in, and banks, the financial industry, not really known for their high-level humor or being accepting of each other's humor. But I created a space where they said, it's okay to giggle, just a little. And then it created a much larger culture piece for them. And I've heard recently that that company kept employees that they didn't think they would be able to keep because the environment changed over time.
Yeah.
I mean, what we know is bring on a new employee. It's roughly $40,000 to bring on a new employee, train them, get them up to speed. I mean, heck, that you were talking earlier about what's that ROI? That's the ROI.
Yeah, and you brought up culture. Like you changed the culture there.
Absolutely.
Culture, people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars changing their culture. And you're saying, you know, look, we can do these little micro things to change your culture without spending all of that money.
All that money.
Yeah.
And it's time. It's a matter of creating a space where people can be themselves in a place that's safe.
Right.
I love that, and we talk a lot about that at Thrive.
I like it.
Bringing the whole self to work, and you know, a lot of corporations are talking about that too, and I think it's really important to help people define and identify what that is for each of them. To me, it definitely would be humor.
Yeah.
And it'd also be my weirdness. I'm wearing my weird Mustang tank top today, which is the weirdness in me honors the weirdness in you. So being able to bring all of that, weird Mustang, is super important. And I love that you brought in some more of that ROI and impact. And so can you give us an example of one of those ways that you offer that to corporations, organizations? What's something that you go in and do to help them do that besides microdosing and giving permission?
It is fascinating. You can allow a group of people who have spent eons of time together to giggle together, and it immediately changes culture. And it immediately gives them a tether point when they're having the hardest day of their lives to come back and be with each other and say, you remember that one thing? When we're at our worst, do you remember that one thing, that time that we were together and had it shared a laugh? So when I am working with my programs and my speeches, I was going to say shows, but that's not exactly right. When I'm doing my shows, my programs,
Not programs.
one of the big things that we're working on, one of the big things that I do is create a space where everybody can giggle together, and we do different exercises that create that space so that then they can take that back, and that 6 months from now, when they are all together on a very difficult call, when they are all together on something that's very hard, they have an inside joke that they can all kind of wink at the same time, or that one word that they got out of that in that space that they all say to each other now. Like, oh, what a funny thing! You remember? Oh, good old Jenkins over here. Even though the guy's name's not Jenkins, but I, for some reason, called that guy Jenkins on the program. So it's those kinds of things that create a tidal wave. But it is that drop in the bucket that creates those ripple effects.
Right.
And that's what I do.
Yeah, and I like that you bring up the drop that creates a ripple effect, because I don't think people realize the importance of that drop. Because we were located at the Technology Innovation Centers where Thrive offices were. And when we first moved in, a lot of the rooms weren't rented out there. It was a lot of new startups and stuff like that. We move into the space, and the first thing we do is we're going to go meet all our neighbors. So we have cups, Thrive cups with candy and coffee, and we're going to every room, and we're meeting hi, we're Thrive, we're new to the building. Jazz hands. People were touring us around their business. They were so excited that we were doing this. And the director of Research Park at the time comes up to me and says, after you guys moved in, it was probably 2 to 3 months after we moved in, they filled, like it started the innovation, the entire building, which was 5 floors and I don't know how many offices, filled up for the first time. And I'm like, it's one of those things.
Mic drop.
Yeah.
It's like, did we do that? What are the odds that the shift happened shortly after we were there? And he would camp out in our office all the time. He'd come up there and plunk himself down, and we were like that.
We're in a meeting, we're trying to get ready.
Right, something. And he'd come in and plunk in, and there were those people in the building that would come into our office and plop down and, I've had a rough day, and then just sit there for hours. But we were like that space that people came to. And it's like you said, you just need the initial drop and it just infiltrates.
Absolutely. Well, it is a good example here in the Milwaukee area where we lived for a little while. We lived on a corner, and my wife and I always had people in the front yard. The same kind of thing. It created culture. It created a shared environment, created a shared story. A big part of what I do is re-explaining to people that change piece or innovation. We do these large initiatives where we're going to create change. We're going to change our businesses. We're going to change everything. We're going to be innovative. That's not how this works.
And it freaks everybody out. Everybody,
Oh my God.
Absolutely. Wait, how?
Sympathetic nervous
When?
system.
Where? Yeah. What do you mean?
Office Space. Remember when they bring in the guys? The guy. Yeah.
People person. I like people.
It's something that can be done. I think that we make the mistake of going to say we're going to change, we're going to innovate. It's not that. It's we're going to make one choice today that's going to affect tomorrow.
Yeah.
And we're going to make a ton of effective choices throughout a small amount of time. That's going to create a space where change isn't inevitable, isn't necessary. Or sorry, it's not necessary, it's inevitable.
Yeah. So let's go there. So I'm a business.
Yeah.
I have you in. Where do we start?
We all sit down and we cry in the corner for a while. We just commiserate and just cry. Just all of that. That's all that we do. Usually what happens is being predominantly a speaker at this point, if there is a meeting or if there is like a company-wide meeting or a conference or you're presenting a town hall.
Yeah, they have a lot of those.
For those kinds of corporate environments. I also do conferences and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But we will sit down and I'll say, what are you guys up against right now? What are you dealing with?
Mm-hmm.
Every program that I do is rooted in what they're going through. And has bits and pieces of that. Because I want to be the extension of an existing team. I have no desire to come in, shoot good guns and blazes, and then take off. Like, that's not my idea.
Probably was really loud.
Yeah, that's okay. Or, he's sitting over here.
You okay?
What are you doing? His headphones are exploding. I have those conversations and say, what are you up against? What are you dealing with? Tell me some of the culture that exists here now. Tell me some of your inside jokes. Tell me some of the things that I should know so I can stand in front of people and they think I might be part of this.
Awesome.
And then I gain that trust. And then we create a space where maybe you guys can trust each other a little bit more. And then trust begets change. Trust begets innovation.
That's beautiful. That's also that's how Thrive interacts with the organizations and corporations that we work with, is meeting everyone where they're at.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then coming up with a personalized strategy for that organization.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I love that. And trust is at the forefront. I find as we delve into things that trust is kind of underlies everything. Right. Yes. Personal responsibility and
These are all dominoes. Trust, love. Trust begets love. Love begets marriage. Marriage begets children, I believe is what they call it too.
love and marriage.
Up in a tree, KISS. Yeah, that's all these things. But it all starts with trust. It all starts with giving somebody else an opportunity to let trust happen.
Yeah.
How do you think?
I like that.
How do you think that empathy might play into that?
You can't have trust without empathy.
Right.
You can't have trust without a want to understand somebody else. And that is the root of empathy.
The one thing that came up for me is the context. Like you knew what was going on in the office at Groupon when you left the conference room.
Yep.
Like, and that's why you knew it was okay to row by.
I don't know if I knew it was okay, but I totally went for it.
Your intuition told you that
fair
it could
enough.
help. But, keeping in context, like you wouldn't want to do that outside of a conference room where someone is having a disciplinary meeting so you know what I mean? Like it's just important to, have that context as you work into the empathetic piece of it. And then what we already talked about, knowing your audience. Like you said, asking the corporations that you're working with, okay, tell me some of your inside jokes. What are you up against? And what I heard in that is that you asking about their inside jokes gave you an insight into what their culture thinks is humorous, so that you don't come in, I don't know, wearing a giant sunshine hat, and then it's like, an organization that's opposite of the NRA or something, and you came in with your guns blazing. That would not go over.
Wouldn't go as well.
No. So, and then you also mentioned earlier to keep in mind that people wouldn't do well if you made light of their challenges, like midlife. You know, you could call yourself, like, I'm really old, and so you're going to be my midlife crisis, and that's what, you know. I have a story about this. So my daughter has a chronic illness, and in 2015, she was diagnosed with a low-grade brain tumor, and she's doing very well. We're managing it. You know, we're getting along well. But the day that she was diagnosed, my husband was out of town at a conference, and I had a great friend alongside of me. So when she came out of surgery, you know, we're sitting there by her bedside waiting for my husband to come, and I look at him and I go, "It's not a tumor."
The Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, twins. And he looks at me and he's like, "But it is. It is a tumor." But, like, I guess I was making light of my challenge and it didn't play well with him, but it's what I needed. Like you said, when you were with your coworker who was trying to bridge that dissonance,
it's just the personal responsibility piece of it. So it's kind of like with you and like with me, it's like it's what you needed and you were taking care of yourself in that moment to feel better about what this heavy thing you were experiencing.
Yeah. But then where is the boundary? Like, where is it? Like, how can I show up and do that?
Well, now, if he said that to you, then that would have crossed a boundary, I would say. Like, if he said...
Well, I would suggest that it might be time. It might be you were similar paths. No, not even that. You were on similar paths in your journey for dealing with what was going on. You, much more in the front line at that point, could make light of something because it had started to dull. It had started to wear. He, walking right into it in that moment, was not there yet. But I bet full well that now, if you say it's a tumor, or it's not a tumor, he giggles. It's a tumor. Because now he's at a place where that journey and that stress became the norm.
That resonates with me. And the reason that resonates with me is we had spent months leading up to that day of diagnosis of not knowing what the heck was going on. And I was already so down in the trenches and drained that was a moment of lightness. That was a like, eureka, we know what to do. And so I was able to do that. Oh, thank you for shedding light on that.
You're welcome. I'm glad that worked out.
This is my the thumbs up.
Yeah.
Cool. So, we already talked a little bit about the balance and the gap that you can find sometimes in humor when you're in relations to others. And just wondering if you had any shares along that could help illustrate that for the viewers more.
I mean, that's a challenge for me, what you guys just talked about in that example. And, thank you for shedding light on that. Because there are times with my husband's a comedian. I mean,
not really. Like, he's not
one of those,
been on stage.
Right, he's not been on stage, but everything's funny. And I love that about him. I appreciate that about him. But sometimes I'm stressed and I'm doing something and I need to get it done and, I'm already 10 things behind and I have to get information from him. So I'm talking to him and I'm like, 10 steps ahead now, catching the answer so I can be 20 steps ahead. And he starts making jokes.
Yep.
And I point this at, he does it to me a lot. So on the occasional time I do it to him and he gets frustrated, I'm always like, see, that's what you always do to me. But it's fun being on the other side.
It sure is.
When you're the person doing it and the other person's frustrated, you don't like their frustration, but it's super fun being that one because you're, oh, I'm funny. And this is fun. And I'm the lighthearted person here. And why are you so stressed out, you crabby person over there? But when you're on the other side and you're the stressed out, then it's not as fun. Then you're like, you don't want to be the sourpuss, so you're like, okay, I don't want to get on him for this because that was really funny, but I am really stressed. So you kind of have that internal contrast going on. Like, that was funny. I'm stressed. That was funny. Like, you have that devil and angel thing going on because you're on the other side and you get it. But so how do you balance, like, how do you figure those situations out?
I think what you're describing is a beautiful, beautiful conversation between two people. As frustrating and weird as it might sound, I think that that pattern breaking is what he's giving you as a gift in that instance. I think that a lot of the things that we see in the world, a lot of the things that are given to us that are stressful or hard, are gifts, because they give us an opportunity to use them later in a different way that we would never have known. For this, with that conflict of, I'm being serious and you're being a jokey fool over here, what is happening? It caused you to breathe. It made you stop and take a breath. And I bet that made you function at a much higher level.
Yes.
There's magic in disruption.
The pause. We talk about the pause. Yeah.
So is it annoying? Yeah, probably. Because it broke the music in your brain.
Yeah.
But it made that mashup happen.
Yeah. And there are those times where I just stop and laugh and I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And I laugh and I breathe and I'm like, that's just what I needed. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's where it happens. That's that beautiful moment.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'm always going to think about this is a beautiful, whenever I'm in that moment.
Stop being beautiful. Stop being beautiful at me.
Beautiful moment.
Thanks for the gift.
You're so bad. You're so bad.
Oh, just rip your dick apart.
Well, speaking of ripping things apart, I was trying to think. We always have
This is a great segue whenever's happening. I love it.
I'm good at these segues. Ripping things apart. We always have a book segment.
We do.
We do have a book segment. And I was racking my brain about what book about humor in the workplace could I bring in? And I said ripping things apart because, you rip pages in books.
Oh, yeah.
That was the segment.
Right in half. Yeah. The library hates it.
The library really hates it.
I just start tearing books up.
I'm banned.
From the librarian.
Yeah. You like this, huh? How's your cats now? That's fair.
Okay, no.
Okay, I went there.
Not just librarians have cats. But I couldn't think of one. I felt horrible. I could not think of one book that I felt good about bringing in. I mean, I thought of Tina Fey's Bossy Pants just because it had boss in it.
Sure.
But
Bossy Pants is a fun title.
It's a very fun title. But are there any books on humor in the workplace?
There are a few. They are out in the world. If you were to go into Google and type humor in the workplace, a few of them will pop up.
Yeah, Bossy Pants was one of the first ones that popped
there
up
you go.
when I did that. But
Yeah.
yeah.
A lot of them are attached to professional speakers.
Okay.
I have one will be ultimately coming out probably next year about all of this topic.
Awesome.
Innovation and change and how to make that easier for yourself.
Do you have a title for it yet?
No, I don't. We're working on it right now.
Shall we do a poll?
Ooh, I think please pull away. I have another book that's going to come out early this year. It's already March. It will be coming out this year. Let's call it. Awesome. Called Thought While Thinking Thoughts About Thoughts. And it is a culmination of several years worth of journaling. I do one thought a day, nothing more, because I don't want to commit to it. And we've commented on a few of them and gotten some friends to get in on it. And we're releasing those as a larger anthology, I suppose is the best way to put it. And we also have a book coming out called Shelter in a Place That Moves.
Okay.
Because during COVID...
I love this story.
We took off. So we lived here in Milwaukee area, and COVID happened. I have a son who has a congenital heart defect, so we were being very, very careful. And we were not in love with the house that we were in as much as we thought we would be at this point. And we knew we were going to get stuck in it. And we had an opportunity to buy an RV and take off. So we sold everything that we had, and we took off for 9 months around the country, traveled. All of the conference industry disappeared, all the meeting industry disappeared. So we just took off and explored the country and saw 30 states in 9 months. And this is a combination of the lessons that we learned and I learned on that
In your
adventure.
junior park ranger status.
It just went up, up, up. I'll tell you how many badges I got on that trip. It's a little bit easier when you're standing with a 5 and a 6-year-old going, can they have badges in me also?
Yeah, and then it's just kind of tight.
Here's mine. Can I get some?
Oh, their mom definitely needs one. She's in the car. Yeah.
It sounds like trick-or-treating.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, it's trick-or-treating with American history. Yeah.
Well, I'd love for you to let viewers know how they can keep up to date on the trajectory of your books and how
Sure.
to get in touch with you too about coming and speaking and working with their organizations. How should they do that?
The best place to find me is at patdwyerwastaken.com because patdwyer.com was taken, so I got patdwyerwastaken.com.
I saw that when I went to your website.
Yeah, no,
Oh,
it wasn't.
okay.
I was not kidnapped.
All right.
I went to your website and I just started laughing because I immediately caught what your website was. I'm like, that is hilarious.
No. Well, thank you very much.
It's easy to remember. patdwyerwastaken.com, and we'll also put that in the notes of the episode. Is there one thing that you'd like viewers to take away from what you shared today?
I would think the number one takeaway would be that you have it in you. And we did it on the playground as kids, and we can do it now. We just have to remind ourselves that it's there.
Yeah.
I love that.
yeah.
It reminds me of Why So Serious.
Why so serious? Well, oh, does it? Oh, no.
Oh, no. You know, like the opposite. Like, the opposite, but not
the rest of the story.
But,
Okay.
but like, you don't have to be so serious. So it reminds me too of what I try to share with my clients is, you've mastered survival mode. Now it's time to live.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great, great takeaway.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Pat, so much. We're going to ask you to sit here with us while we wrap up the show, but it's just so... Please do that the whole time. It was such a joy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I
It
really
was a
appreciate
really great time and so insightful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. So Pat shared what he'd like people to take away. Lori, what is your big takeaway from today?
Well, I think it's what Pat said. Just that ripple, that little bit of infusion, balanced, tactful, knowing your audience, having that awareness and just starting where you can and just being that infusion of a lighter experience and a safe space where people can start being more authentic.
I love that. The microdosing that leads to the ripple effect.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Cool. It reminds me of, too, when we did that meditation retreat a couple of years ago, and we were talking about enlightenment, and the facilitator looked at all of us and said, you know what that means, right? And we're all like, oh my God, it's the meaning of life.
It's the meaning.
Seriously, this was a guy who established the Deepak Chopra centers with Deepak Chopra at the time. Roger Gabriel. Roger, if you're watching, we'd love to have you on the show.
Right.
Which camera should I take that to?
I wish
That one right there. Thank you, John. Roger looked at us and said, enlightenment means lighten up.
Yeah, lighten up on yourself. Yeah.
Are you kidding me? You've been in the Ganges River, like bathing our meditation beads in there for us, and all you tell us is to lighten up. But I think it's the perfect thing.
Yeah, I agree.
And I love that people are starting to be interested and curious about how to bring that into work in the workplace.
Well, I mean, especially now after COVID, we talked about that. And just the mental health industry is in such a crisis now.
Yeah.
And so many people now more than ever need mental health help. And just that aspect, infusing that piece of it, I think would be so helpful for society, and what we've gone through and where we're at and, things that we're currently experiencing is critical, I think, to us moving forward.
Honestly, in my life, it's the way that I get through and enjoy it.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. Thanks to our guest today, Pat Dwyer.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, John, for putting this all together for us. We could not do this without you. John from Milwaukee Video, mkevideo.com. Special thanks to you, Jen. Always a pleasure to be here with you on BBI.
And with you. Join us next time for brilliant business insights, getting you where you want to go, feeling the way you want to feel, being who you want to be by removing the BS.
Thanks, everyone.